The water hammer started at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, and that's when everything Michael Carter thought he knew about his life began to unravel like thread pulled from a sweater. He was 23 years old, home for the summer after graduating from state with a degree in architecture, sleeping in his childhood bedroom with its faded posters of bands he no longer listened to, and trophies from high school track meets gathering dust on shelves. The sound woke him instantly, a violent, rhythmic banging in the pipes that made the walls shudder and his teeth ache. Michael stumbled downstairs in boxers and an old t-shirt, his dark hair sticking up at odd angles, to find his father already in the kitchen. Robert Carter stood at the sink in his bathrobe, turning the faucet on and off with the methodical precision of an engineer, which he was. His silver-streaked hair was perfectly combed despite the hour, and his jaw was set in that familiar way that meant he was solving a problem. "It's the main line," Robert said without looking up. "Probably sediment buildup. I'll call someone in the morning." Michael's mother, Patricia, appeared in the doorway wearing her silk pajamas, her reading glasses perched on her nose. Even in the middle of the night, she looked composed, put together. She'd always been that way, the kind of woman who sent thank-you notes within 24 hours and never left the house without lipstick. "Can't you fix it yourself?" she asked, and there was something in her voice that Michael couldn't quite identify. An edge, a tension. "Not this," Robert said. "It's too deep. We need a professional." The banging continued, echoing through the house like a heartbeat, like something trying to get out. Michael went back to bed but didn't sleep. He lay there, listening to the pipes sing their strange, urgent song, and he thought about how his parents had lived in this house for 30 years, how they'd raised him here, how he knew every creaking floorboard and every water stain on the ceiling. But he'd never heard the pipes sound like this, never heard them sound angry. By morning, the noise had stopped, but his father had already called Berkshire Plumbing. The truck arrived at 9 o'clock, a white van with blue lettering and a cartoon wrench on the side. The plumber who climbed out was a broad-shouldered man in his 50s named Frank Delgado, with kind eyes and hands scarred from decades of work. He carried a toolbox that looked like it had survived a war and wore boots caked with the evidence of 100 basement floors. Michael was drinking coffee at the kitchen table, scrolling through job listings on his laptop, when Frank came in to introduce himself. His mother hovered nearby, wiping down counters that were already clean. His father stood with his arms crossed, explaining the problem with technical precision: water pressure, valve configurations, the age of the house's infrastructure. Frank nodded along, asked a few questions, and then said the words that would change everything. "Mind if I check out the basement? That's usually where the real story is." Something passed between Michael's parents then. A look. Brief, almost invisible, but Michael caught it. His mother's hand tightened on her dishcloth. His father's jaw clenched. "Of course," Robert said, his voice smooth as glass. "The door is just off the kitchen. Watch your head on the stairs. The ceiling's low." Michael watched Frank disappear through the basement door, heard his heavy footsteps descending the wooden stairs, and felt an inexplicable chill run down his spine. He'd been in that basement 1,000 times. It was unfinished, all concrete and exposed beams, with his father's workbench in one corner and boxes of Christmas decorations stacked against the walls. There was nothing down there but dust and spiders and the accumulated debris of 30 years of suburban life. But his mother was gripping that dishcloth like it was the only thing keeping her anchored to the earth. "Mom?" Michael said. "You okay?" Patricia turned to him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, sweetheart, just tired. Didn't sleep well with all that noise." She folded the dishcloth with precise, careful movements and hung it over the oven handle. "I think I'll go lie down for a bit. Let me know when he's done." She left the kitchen, her footsteps soft on the carpeted stairs. Michael looked at his father, who was staring at the basement door like he could see through it. "Dad?" Robert blinked, shook his head slightly. "What? Is something wrong?" "Wrong? No, why would anything be wrong?" But his father's hand trembled slightly as he lifted his coffee mug, and he set it down without drinking. Michael stood up. I'm going to go check on him, see if he needs anything. No! The word came out too fast, too sharp. Robert softened his tone. I mean, let the man work. You know how it is. People don't like being watched while they're doing their job. But Michael was already moving toward the basement door. He'd lived 23 years in this house, and he'd never seen his father nervous. Robert Carter didn't get nervous. He gave presentations to boardrooms full of executives. He'd coached Michael's Little League team without breaking a sweat. He'd delivered eulogies at funerals with steady hands and clear eyes. But right now, standing in the kitchen of his own home, he looked like a man waiting for a verdict. The basement stairs creaked under Michael's weight. The air grew cooler as he descended, that familiar underground smell of concrete and earth filling his nostrils. The single bulb at the bottom cast everything in harsh, yellow light, creating shadows that seemed deeper than they should be. Frank was crouched near the water heater, his flashlight beam playing across the pipes. "How's it looking?" Michael asked. Frank glanced over his shoulder. "Your main shutoff valve is pretty corroded, probably original to the house, but that's not what's causing your water hammer." He stood up, brushing off his knees. "Mind holding the flashlight for me? I need to check something back here." Michael took the flashlight and followed Frank deeper into the basement, past his father's workbench with its neat rows of tools, past the shelves of paint cans and old photo albums. The back corner was dim, crowded with furniture they'd been meaning to donate for years. A desk, a filing cabinet, boxes stacked 3 high. Frank squeezed behind the filing cabinet, and Michael heard him grunt with effort. "You folks ever move this stuff? There's a whole section of wall back here I need to access." "I don't think so. Want me to help?" "Yeah, let's shift this cabinet out. Careful, it's heavy." Together they pulled the metal filing cabinet away from the wall, its legs scraping across the concrete floor like fingernails on a chalkboard. The desk came next, old and solid and coated in years of dust. As they moved it aside, Michael saw what Frank had been reaching for, a section of the basement wall that had been completely hidden. But it wasn't just wall, it was a door. Not a regular door. This was heavy, industrial, made of metal painted the same gray as the concrete around it. It had a handle, a deadbolt, and something else, a keypad mounted beside it, the kind you might see on a safe or a security system. The LED display was dark, but there was a thin coating of dust on everything except the keypad itself, which looked like it had been used recently. Frank whistled low. "Well, that's something you don't see every day in a residential basement." Michael stared at the door. His mouth had gone dry. "I've never seen this before." "How long have you lived here?" "My whole life, 23 years. Frank tried the handle. It didn't budge. He examined the keypad more closely, careful not to touch it. "This is serious security, like bank vault serious. You sure you don't know what your parents keep back here?" Michael shook his head slowly. His heart was pounding now, a steady drumbeat in his ears that almost drowned out his thoughts. "I have no idea."
Frank stepped back, hands on his hips. "Well, I can fix your pipe problem, but this," he gestured at the door, "this is between you and your folks. None of my business what people keep locked up in their own homes." But it was Michael's business, wasn't it? He lived here. He'd grown up here, and his parents had never mentioned a locked room in the basement, never even hinted at it. He thought about his mother's white-knuckled grip on that dishcloth, his father's trembling hand. They knew, they'd always known, and they'd hidden it from him. "Can you finish the plumbing work?" Michael asked, his voice sounding distant to his own ears. "Sure thing. Give me another hour, maybe 2. Frank collected his tools and headed back toward the water heater, leaving Michael standing alone in front of the hidden door. Michael reached out and touched the metal surface. It was cold, solid, utterly impenetrable. He tried to remember every time he'd been in this basement, every game of hide-and-seek as a child, every trip down to fetch holiday decorations or old yearbooks. Had the furniture always been arranged just so? Had his parents deliberately created a barrier? And if so, what were they hiding? He climbed back up the stairs, his legs feeling unsteady. His father was exactly where he'd left him, standing in the kitchen, and the look on Robert's face when Michael emerged told him everything he needed to know. "You found it," Robert said quietly. "What is it?" "Michael." "What is it, Dad? What's behind that door that I've never known about? You're going to tell me what you're hiding." His father opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, Patricia's voice drifted down from upstairs. "Robert? Robert, is he done yet?" And Michael realized with a cold certainty that settled in his bones, his mother knew. They were running out of time. Michael had always thought of himself as observant. It was part of what made him good at architecture, the ability to see spaces, to understand how people moved through them, to notice the details that others missed. He could walk into a building and tell you within minutes where the stress points were, where the light would fall at different times of day, how the acoustics would behave. But somehow he'd lived his entire life in this house and never noticed that a whole room had been hidden from him. He sat at the kitchen table that night, long after Frank Delgado had finished the plumbing work and driven away in his white van, while his parents spoke in hushed tones in the den with the door closed. Through the walls, he could hear the rise and fall of their voices, his mother's higher, more urgent, his father's lower, more measured. They had been in there for 2 hours. Twice his mother had come out to get water, and both times she'd looked at Michael with an expression he couldn't read. Not quite fear, not quite guilt. Something in between. He thought about his childhood. Robert and Patricia Carter had been good parents by any reasonable measure. They attended his school plays and soccer games. They helped with homework, taught him to ride a bike, took family vacations to national parks where his father would point out geological formations and his mother would pack elaborate picnic lunches. They had family dinners every night, asked about his day, listened when he talked about his dreams of becoming an architect. But now, sitting in the kitchen with his cold coffee and his racing thoughts, Michael wondered what else he'd missed. Had there always been secrets? Were there other rooms he didn't know about? Other locked doors? Other keypads? Other things hidden just out of sight? He climbed back up the stairs, his legs feeling unsteady. His father was exactly where he'd left him, standing in the kitchen, and the look on Robert's face when Michael emerged told him everything he needed to know. "You found it," he began.
"I'm upset," Michael shot back. "There's a locked room in our basement that I've never known about. A room with a keypad and a deadbolt? What the hell, Dad?" Robert winced at the profanity. The Carters didn't swear. It was one of those unspoken rules, like taking off your shoes at the door or not talking about religion at dinner parties. "I understand you're angry." "I'm not just angry. I'm confused. Michael stopped, searching for the right word. "I feel like I don't know you. Either of you." "You do know us," Robert said firmly. "You know everything important about who we are. We're your parents. We love you. We've always loved you and done what we thought was best for you." "Then explain the room." Robert was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on his folded hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "It's complicated." "Then uncomplicate it." "We can't." Robert looked up, and Michael saw something in his father's eyes he'd never seen before. Genuine fear. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I need you to trust us. I need you to trust that we had good reasons for what we did." Michael laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Trust you? You've been hiding a secret room in our house for God knows how long, and you want me to just trust you?" "Yes." "That's insane." "I know how it sounds." Robert leaned forward, his voice intense. "But Michael, there are things in this world that are complicated, things that don't have simple explanations. And sometimes the people we love have to carry burdens we don't share with others, not because we don't trust them, but because we're trying to protect them." "Protect me from what?" "I can't tell you that. Can't or won't. Both." His father walked to the window, looking out at the backyard where Michael had played as a child.
The swing set was still there, rusted now, the chains creaking in the wind. Your mother and I have lived certain lives. We've made certain choices, and we've worked very hard to give you a normal childhood, a normal life. Don't you see? That room, whatever you think is in there, it has nothing to do with you. But that was a lie, Michael thought. It had everything to do with him, because it had shaped the house he grew up in, the parents who raised him, the very foundation of his reality. You couldn't hide something that significant and claim it was irrelevant. He thought about the details he did know. His parents had met in their 20s, married quickly, bought this house before he was born. His father worked as a civil engineer, specializing in infrastructure, roads, bridges, water systems. His mother had been a librarian before retiring 5 years ago. They were quiet people, private people. They had friends, but not many. They volunteered at church and donated to local charities and lived lives of careful, comfortable routine. Except now Michael wondered if any of that was real. Maybe his father wasn't really an engineer. Maybe his mother hadn't really been a librarian. Maybe their entire existence was a cover for something else, something hidden behind a locked door with a keypad and a deadbolt. "I'm going to find out," Michael said quietly. "What?" "Whatever you are hiding, I'm going to find out. You can either tell me, or I'll figure it out on my own. But I'm not going to live in this house and pretend there isn't a locked room in the basement." "Michael, please." "No." Michael stood up, surprised by the steadiness in his own voice. "I'm 23 years old. I'm not a child. You don't get to hide things from me anymore and expect me to just accept it." He left the kitchen, climbed the stairs to his childhood bedroom, and closed the door. He could hear his parents talking again, their voices drifting up through the vents. His mother was crying. He'd never heard his mother cry before, not at funerals, not during sad movies, not even when her own mother had died. Patricia Carter was made of steel and grace and perfect composure, but she was crying now, and that scared Michael more than anything else. He pulled out his laptop and started searching. He didn't even know what he was looking for at first, just typing random phrases into Google, trying to make sense of what he'd found. Locked rooms in basements, secret rooms in houses, keypads on doors. The results were a mix of home security forums, true crime stories, and paranoid conspiracy theories. None of it felt right. Then he thought about his father's work: civil engineering, infrastructure, government contracts. Robert traveled sometimes, always to meetings or project sites, always returning with stories about boring conference rooms and mediocre hotel food. Michael had never thought to question it. Why would he? But now he pulled up his father's company website, started reading through the list of projects, the client testimonials, the vague descriptions of critical infrastructure development and sensitive government consultation. His phone buzzed. A text from his best friend Jake. "Dude, you coming to Dave's party Saturday? Everyone's asking about you." Michael stared at the message. A week ago, his biggest concern had been finding a job and figuring out how to move out without hurting his parents' feelings. He'd been worried about interviews and rent deposits and whether he should get a car or stick with public transportation. Normal 23-year-old problems. Now he was sitting in his childhood bedroom, trying to figure out if his entire life had been a lie. He didn't respond to Jake. Instead, he got up and went to his closet, started pulling out boxes of old memories, yearbooks, photo albums, report cards, drawings he'd made in elementary school. He spread everything across his bed and started looking for clues, for gaps, for anything that didn't make sense. There, a photo from his 8th birthday party. He was wearing a paper crown, blowing out candles on a homemade cake, surrounded by kids from school. But in the background, just visible through the kitchen doorway, was his father on the phone. And his father's expression was wrong, tense, worried. Michael had been so focused on his cake and his presents that he'd never noticed before.
Another photo. A family vacation to Yellowstone when he was 12. They were standing in front of Old Faithful, all three of them smiling. But his mother's hand was on his shoulder, gripping it tightly, and there was something in her eyes, something watchful, like she was looking for threats instead of enjoying the moment. Had it always been like this? Had his parents always been on edge, always checking over their shoulders, always hiding something? Or was he seeing patterns now because he wanted to see them, because he needed the world to make sense after discovering that locked door? A knock at his door. His mother's voice. "Michael, can I come in?" "Yeah." Patricia entered, closing the door softly behind her. She'd changed into regular clothes, jeans and a sweater, and washed her face. Without makeup, she looked older, more vulnerable. She sat on the edge of his bed, careful not to disturb the scattered photos. "You were such a beautiful child," she said, picking up a picture of Michael at age 5, gap-toothed and grinning. "Mom,
Let me say this." She set the photo down gently. "Your father and we haven't always been honest with you, but we've always loved you. That's the truth that matters. The door in the basement, the room, what's inside, none of that changes how we feel about you. None of that changes that you're our son and we would do anything to keep you safe." "Safe from what?" Patricia smiled sadly. "From the truth, I suppose. But you're right. You're not a child anymore. You deserve answers." She took a deep breath. "The room contains files, documents, records from before you were born, from lives your father and I lived before we became your parents." Michael's heart was pounding. "What kind of lives?" "Complicated ones. Dangerous ones in some ways." She looked directly at him, and her eyes were clear and steady. "We worked for the government, Michael, both of us, in capacities that I can't fully explain, because we signed agreements, made promises. And when we decided to leave that life, to start a family, to give you the normal childhood we never had, we brought some of that work home with us. Records we couldn't destroy, couldn't leave behind. Things that needed to be kept safe and secret." "Are you spies?" The word sounded ridiculous as soon as it left his mouth, like something from a movie. "No, not spies." Patricia stood up, walked to the window. "We were analysts, researchers. We worked with information, with data, with patterns that most people never see. And some of that information is still relevant, still dangerous in the wrong hands." "So you've been hiding classified documents in our basement for my entire life?" "Yes." The simple admission hit Michael harder than any elaborate explanation would have. Yes. His parents were criminals. Or patriots. Or something in between. They'd been lying to him. Lying to their neighbors, lying to everyone. For 23 years. Does anyone else know? A few people, not many. The plumber, Frank. He won't say anything. He's been in too many basements, seen too many things people don't want seen. He understands discretion. Patricia turned back to face him. "But Michael, you have to understand, this doesn't change who we are as a family. We're still the people who raised you. We're still the people who love you. We just have a past we couldn't share." Michael wanted to believe her. He wanted to accept this explanation and move on, to go back to worrying about job applications and party invitations. But something in him had shifted. The locked door had opened something in his mind, and he couldn't close it again. "I want to see inside." Patricia's face went pale. "No. You just said I deserve answers.
I said you deserve some answers, not everything. Not that. She moved towards him, her hands outstretched. Michael, please. There are things in that room that would only hurt you, things that would change how you see the world, how you see us. Let us keep this one secret. Let us protect you from this. But Michael was already shaking his head. I can't. I can't live here knowing there's a locked room in the basement and not knowing what's inside. I can't pretend everything is normal when it's not. His mother stood there for a long moment, her hands still outstretched, and Michael saw her make a decision. Saw it happen behind her eyes, a shifting, a settling. Then you'll have to leave. If you can't accept this, if you can't trust us, then maybe it's time for you to find your own place. Start your own life. You're kicking me out? I'm giving you a choice. Stay and trust us, or go and live without answers. Those are your options, Michael. I'm sorry, but that's all we can offer.
He stared at his mother, this woman who had packed his school lunches and taught him to tie his shoes and read him bedtime stories. This stranger with classified documents in her basement. This person he'd known his entire life and didn't know at all. I need time, he said finally. Patricia nodded. Take all the time you need, but don't go back to the basement. Don't try to open that door. Promise me. Michael didn't promise. He couldn't, because in that moment, standing in his childhood bedroom with photos of his innocent past scattered around him, he knew that he wouldn't stop until he knew what his parents were hiding, no matter what it cost. His mother left, closing the door quietly behind her, and Michael was alone with his questions and his fears, and the growing certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. Michael didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around him. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind against the windows seemed amplified, significant. Somewhere below him, through layers of wood and insulation and carpet, was that locked door. And behind it, according to his mother, were secrets from lives his parents had lived before he existed. By morning, he'd made his decision. He wasn't going to leave. He wasn't going to let this go. He was going to find out what was in that room, no matter what his parents said. The opportunity came 3 days later. His mother had a doctor's appointment in the city. Something routine, she said, just a checkup. And his father was flying to Des Moines for a conference. They'd be gone from 9 in the morning until after 6 in the evening. Michael pretended he had a job interview in the afternoon. Said he'd probably grab lunch with Jake afterward. His parents accepted this with visible relief, clearly hoping that normal life was reasserting itself, that their son was moving past his questions. He waited until their cars pulled out of the driveway, watched from his bedroom window as his mother's sedan turned left toward the highway and his father's SUV turned right toward the airport. Then he counted to 100, just to be sure, before heading downstairs. The basement was exactly as he'd left it. Frank Delgado had done good work. The pipes were quiet now, no more water hammer, no more violent banging in the walls. But the furniture was still pushed aside, and the locked door was still there, gray and impenetrable and utterly silent. He approached it slowly. Up close, he could see more details. The metal was cold-rolled steel, probably reinforced. The keypad was a commercial model, the kind used in secure facilities. And the deadbolt, when he examined it more closely, was a high-security lock, pick-resistant, probably worth more than everything else in the basement combined. He tried the obvious codes first. His birthday, 0612, nothing. His parents' anniversary, 11/22, nothing. His graduation year, 2024. The display remained dark. Michael sat back on his heels, thinking. His parents were methodical people. Whatever code they'd chosen, it would be something they could remember, something significant but not obvious.
He tried his grandparents' birthdays, the address of their first house, random combinations of numbers from family history. Nothing worked. He went upstairs to his father's home office, a small room at the end of the hall that Robert kept meticulously organized. Everything had its place: pens in the pen holder, files in the filing cabinet, books alphabetized on the shelves. Michael had been in here 1,000 times, but always with permission, always with his father present. Now alone, he felt like an intruder. He started with the desk drawers. Bills, tax returns, insurance documents, nothing unusual. The filing cabinet was locked, but Michael remembered seeing his father keep the key in a fake book on the shelf, a hollowed-out copy of War and Peace. He found it, unlocked the cabinet, and started going through the files. Most of it was exactly what you'd expect: mortgage papers, investment statements, warranties for appliances. But in the bottom drawer, hidden beneath a stack of old utility bills, Michael found a manila folder labeled simply Archive. Inside were photocopies of documents, all heavily redacted. Black bars covered most of the text, but Michael could make out fragments. Dates from the late 1990s, references to Project Cygnus, mentions of classified materials and information security protocols. There were names too, or at least partial names. Dr. R. Carter and Dr. P. Carter appeared multiple times.
Doctor? His parents weren't doctors. His father was an engineer. His mother was a librarian. Except maybe they weren't. Maybe they'd never been. Michael's hands were shaking as he took photos of each page with his phone. He didn't understand what he was looking at, but he knew it was important. He knew it was connected to that locked door in the basement. He put everything back exactly as he'd found it, relocked the filing cabinet, returned the key to its hiding place. Then he went to his mother's office, really just a converted spare bedroom where she'd kept her books and computer when she was still working at the library. Patricia's space was softer than Robert's. There were photos on the walls, family pictures, vacation snapshots, Michael's school portraits arranged chronologically from kindergarten through high school. Her desk was covered with stacks of books, reading glasses, handwritten notes on yellow legal pads. It all looked so normal, so innocuous. But when Michael turned on her computer, he found it password protected. He tried the same combinations he'd used on the basement keypad. Nothing worked. He tried book titles, author names, common library terms. Still nothing. Then, on impulse, he tried his own name. Michael. The computer unlocked. The desktop was clean, organized, just like everything else in his mother's life. Folders labeled recipes, book club, photos, budget. Michael clicked through them systematically, finding exactly what the labels promised. But there was one folder that didn't fit. Research. Inside were dozens of PDFs, all academic papers on cryptography, data security, information theory, papers written by authors with names like Rivest, Shamir, Adelman, papers about encryption algorithms and digital signatures and secure communication protocols. Why would a retired librarian have hundreds of pages of academic research on cryptography? Unless she wasn't really a librarian at all. Michael heard a car in the driveway, and his heart stopped. He checked his phone. 12:30. His parents shouldn't be home for hours. He shut down the computer, raced to the window, and felt relief flood through him. Just a delivery truck making a U-turn. But the close call reminded him that he was running out of time. He needed to get into that basement room, and he needed to do it now. He went back downstairs, stood in front of the keypad, and thought about everything he'd learned. His parents were doctors, or had been. They'd worked on something called Project Cygnus. They'd been involved with classified information, cryptography, data security. They'd hidden all of this for decades, created entire false identities, lived as different people. What would people like that use as a security code? Michael thought about cryptography. about how encryption worked. He'd taken a computer science course in college, learned the basics. Encryption keys were often derived from large prime numbers, from mathematical sequences that seemed random but followed patterns. Prime numbers. He tried entering primes in sequence. 2, 3, 5, 7. Nothing. Then he tried larger primes, famous ones. 1009, 1013, 1019. Still nothing. He was missing something. Something obvious, something his parents would have thought of but hoped he wouldn't. Then it hit him. The year he was born. 2001. And his parents' ages that year. His father had been 32, his mother 30. 32 and 30. He tried entering 3230. The keypad beeped, the deadbolt clicked. The door swung open. Michael's breath caught at his throat. He stood there for a long moment, his hand on the door handle, knowing that once he stepped through, he couldn't go back. Whatever was inside would change everything. But he was already changed, wasn't he? The discovery of the door had already altered his reality. Now he just needed to understand how much. He pulled out his phone, turned on the flashlight, and stepped inside.
The room was smaller than he'd expected, maybe 10 feet by 12. The walls were lined with filing cabinets, all of them gray metal like the door. There was a desk at the center with an old computer on it, the kind from the late 1990s with a bulky CRT monitor. And everywhere, absolutely everywhere, were files. Michael approached the nearest filing cabinet and pulled open a drawer. Inside were folders, each one meticulously labeled with dates and code names. He pulled one out at random, Cygnus 0715, 1998. Inside were documents, page after page of technical specifications, communications logs, surveillance reports, names redacted, locations redacted. But the general content was clear: intelligence gathering, data collection, espionage. His parents had been spies. Not analysts, not researchers. Actual spies. Michael's legs felt weak. He sat down at the desk, his mind reeling. The computer was old, but looked functional. He pressed the power button, and after a moment, it whirred to life. The operating system loaded. Windows 98, ancient by modern standards, and then a login screen appeared. No password this time. Instead, a prompt. Voice authentication required. Please state your full name and authorization code. Michael stared at the screen. Voice authentication. From 1998. His parents really had been working at the cutting edge of security technology. He tried anyway. Michael Carter, authorization code. He had no authorization code. The computer beeped in rejection. But maybe he didn't need the computer. The files were right here, thousands of them, documenting whatever project Cygnus had been. He pulled another folder at random. Cygnus 1103, 1999. This one contained surveillance photos, grainy black and white images of people meeting in parks, in restaurants, in what looked like Eastern European cities. Some of the faces were marked with red X's. Others had notes attached: compromised, extracted, neutralized. Michael felt sick. What had his parents done? Who were these people? And what did neutralized mean? He kept looking. More files, more dates, more evidence of a world he'd never imagined. There were technical documents about secure communications, about dead drops in safe houses and extraction protocols. There were maps marked with coordinates. There were letters in foreign languages, Russian, German, Arabic, with translations attached. There were financial records showing money moving through shell companies and offshore accounts. And then, near the back of one filing cabinet, Michael found a folder labeled simply, Michael. His hands were shaking again as he opened it. Inside was everything about him, his birth certificate, but not the one he'd seen before. This one listed different parents, different names. Susan and David Kowalski, not Robert and Patricia Carter. There was a hospital record from Chicago, not the suburban hospital where he'd always believed he was born.
There were adoption papers, dated 3 months after his supposed birth. There were medical records, psychological evaluations, and a handwritten note in his mother's distinctive cursive. He'll never need to know. We'll give him the life we never had. Michael's vision blurred. He wasn't their biological son. He'd been adopted, no, taken, rescued? He couldn't tell from the cryptic documents. But the Carters, or whatever their real names were, had acquired a 3-month-old baby as part of an extraction operation and raised him as their own. The sound of a car door slamming outside made him freeze. He checked his phone. 2:15. His parents were home early. Michael grabbed his phone, took rapid photos of the documents in his folder, and carefully returned everything to its place. He pushed the door shut, heard the deadbolt click, and had just pushed the filing cabinet back into position when he heard his mother's voice from upstairs. "Michael, are you home?"
He climbed the stairs on shaking legs, his mind still processing what he'd discovered. Patricia stood in the kitchen, her purse still on her shoulder, and the moment their eyes met, she knew. "You opened it," she whispered. Michael nodded. He couldn't speak, couldn't form words around the enormity of what he'd learned. His mother moved toward him slowly, carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. "What did you see?" "Everything," his voice cracked. "I saw everything. The files, the surveillance photos, the folder with my name on it." He looked at her, this woman who'd raised him, and felt tears burning his eyes. "Who am I? Who are Susan and David Kowalski?" Patricia's composure finally shattered. Her face crumbled, and she reached for the counter to steady herself. They were good people, innocent people who got caught in something they didn't understand. We tried to protect them, but we couldn't. We failed. She wiped her eyes with trembling hands. "But we saved you. When they died, we made sure you survived. We gave up everything, our careers, our identities, our entire lives to keep you safe." "Safe from what?" "From the people who killed your biological parents, from the organization they accidentally exposed, from a world where children become collateral damage in wars most people don't even know exist." Patricia straightened, and Michael saw steel return to her spine. "Your father and I weren't perfect. We made mistakes in our work, crossed lines we shouldn't have crossed. But saving you, raising you, that was the one thing we got right. You were never part of our penance. You were our redemption." The front door opened, and Robert entered, his conference clearly canceled. He took one look at the scene in the kitchen and set down his briefcase with careful precision. "He knows. He knows," Patricia confirmed. Father and son stared at each other across the kitchen that had witnessed thousands of ordinary moments, homework sessions and birthday parties and quiet Sunday mornings. All of it real, all of it built on a foundation of lies. "I'm not going to apologize," Robert said finally, "for keeping this from you, for the locked door, for any of it. We did what we had to do to give you a chance at normalcy, at happiness, at a life without looking over your shoulder every day. But that's not your choice to make. Don't you understand? You decided what my life would be. You decided what I deserved to know. You treated me like a project, like something to be managed and controlled. We treated you like our son. Every decision we made was because we love you. Love isn't enough when it comes with lies." The three of them stood in silence, the weight of 23 years of secrets pressing down on them. Outside, the neighborhood continued its oblivious routine. Cars passing, dogs barking, children playing. The normal world, where parents were who they claimed to be, and basements didn't hide classified documents, and children grew up knowing their own origins. "What happens now?" Michael asked. Robert and Patricia exchanged a glance, and Michael recognized it as the same wordless communication he'd seen his entire life. Whatever else they'd lied about, their partnership was real. "It depends on you," Robert said. "You can leave. Take what you've learned and build your own life separate from us. We won't stop you. Or," he paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully, "you can stay. Let us explain everything, the whole truth, not just the pieces you found today. It won't be easy. Some of it will hurt, but at least you'll understand." Michael thought about the locked door, now just a door. He thought about the files documenting lives lived in shadow, about Susan and David Kowalski who died for reasons he didn't understand yet, about Robert and Patricia Carter who'd sacrificed their identities to raise someone else's child. He thought about the question that started everything. Who am I?
Maybe the answer wasn't in those files. Maybe it wasn't in birth certificates or adoption papers or classified documents. Maybe identity was something you built, day by day, choice by choice, in kitchens where parents packed school lunches and helped with homework and lied to keep you safe. "Tell me everything," Michael said, starting with their names, my parents' real names. Patricia smiled through her tears. David and Susan Kowalski were environmental scientists who stumbled onto something they shouldn't have seen. And she reached for Robert's hand, we were the operatives sent to clean up the mess. Instead, we saved their son and disappeared. And Project Cygnus? That's where we begin, Robert said, pulling out a chair. Sit down, Michael. This is going to take a while. As Michael sat at the kitchen table, the afternoon light slanting through windows he'd looked through his entire life, he realized that some doors, once opened, changed everything. The water hammer that had started all this was fixed now. The pipes were quiet. But the house would never feel quite the same again. And maybe that was okay. Maybe truth, even painful truth, was better than comfortable ignorance. Maybe knowing who you really were, all the complicated, messy, dangerous parts, was worth the price of losing who you thought you'd been. His parents began to talk, and Michael listened. And somewhere in the basement, behind a locked door with a keypad and a deadbolt, the secrets they'd kept for 23 years finally began to emerge into light.